Always the idealist, Wilson entered the war preparing to develop a peace when it was over. Wilson appointed an inquiry of experts to travel to Europe and identify the causes of war in the hopes of making an educated plan for peace. Wilson knew he had to be fair to all parties, and that restraining German economic and military development too much could lead to future wars. The information provided by the inquiry served as the basis for his famous 14-point speech, where he provided a plan for a peaceful world of self-governed nations. There would be no more secret treaties, no more restrictions on maritime navigation, no more arms races endangering millions. The last and perhaps most contentious of Wilson's points was the formation of a general association of nations. Wilson's plan was adopted by the Allied statesmen as war objectives, and when the Germans requested an armistice in October of 1918, it too was on the basis of the 14 points. 2 months later, when Wilson traveled to Europe to push forward his League of Nations, he was greeted with enormous enthusiasm. Thousands poured into the streets to applaud him, and many even hailed him as a savior. At the Paris Peace Conference, Wilson was appointed the chairman of the commission designated to draft the League's covenant. France and Britain objected to many of his efforts, saying that since they had suffered the brunt of the casualties, Germany should pay them exorbitant reparations. Wilson found himself pitted against two diplomatic sharks, George Clemenceau of France and David Lloyd George of Britain, whose national interests forced Wilson to compromise on his 14 points to the point where Germany felt entirely betrayed, having been promised the points as the foundation for the treaty. Wilson returned home in 1919 to a very tense legislative debate. Wilson's decision not to bring any Republican senators to Paris put him at odds with the very people he had to convince to ratify the treaty.
At one point, the Democratic leadership in the Senate said to the president, "We can get the League through. We can get the treaty through if we will only compromise with your big foe, Henry Cabot Lodge, the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee." And Wilson was angry and his voice shook and he said, "Let Lodge compromise." He was not going to bend.
When Lodge compiled a list of reservations objecting to elements of the League's covenant that might infringe on American sovereignty, Wilson left on a 10,000-mile speaking tour urging the necessity of the League. The senators remained steadfast in their opposition, saying that the League would destroy the Monroe Doctrine and take away control of immigration. On March 19, 1920, the Senate made its decision to reject the Treaty of Versailles, and Wilson's efforts to create a lasting peace along with it. The Senate rejection of the treaty handicapped the League of Nations, but it was still able to operate without its primary sponsor.